because I can put my notes right under the thing.
I call this City Council work session to order Monday, March 22nd. We'll now have a moment of silent prayer. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is it on? Yeah. All right. At this time, we'll open the floor for public comment. If you would like to address council, you may do so by dialing the number on the screen. We ask that you please keep your comments to under 5 minutes. The floor is now open. Okay, seeing no public comment, we will close the floor and move into our discussion items. First one being Heritage Plaza and 14th Street.
So if we can take these in somewhat reverse order. 14th Street was closed last year in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and the governor's closure of a wide range of businesses. We've received a request from Pat Miller of ABCD to consider closing that portion of street again. So it's not an action that the council would normally take in a work session, but thought it important enough to bring up and try to get a sense of where the council would like to go with this, so we can, if necessary, put something on the agenda for the April meeting.
So I read the governor's most recent update, and it looks like restaurants will still be restricted as of April 4th will be the next change, and I think that everything will move to 50%, it looks like, at that point in time. Some will be able to move to 75% if they submit to an independent certification or something like that. I have no idea what that process looks like. I don't know if it's intensive, but they'll so I mean, a lot of them will still be probably restricted to the 50%. So I would support the closure.
Yeah, I agree. Last year one of the reasons was that Heritage Plaza was also under construction. Even though it's completed this year, with the farmers market and other events that will likely happen over there throughout the evenings this summer, I think that it would be good to still provide seating for the general public.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I think in speaking with Councilman Carper's points on the indoor dining going up to 50% on April 4th. I believe outdoor dining or outdoor events is 75%, I think I read. So
I doubt it's that generous.
I thought I read outdoor events was 75%, but
I believe as far as outdoor venues, they were allowed to go. I want to say it was up to 50% of their capacity.
50% of capacity.
I think they were talking about things like stadiums and
like a football game.
like concert facilities that are outdoor, things like that. I believe that's what it was.
And that's as of April 4th.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we could really do, if we were to close this street down again, we could really do the indoor dining at 50% and also provide this outdoor dining at another 50% of whatever we're claiming the outdoor dining would be.
As I read the governor's press release, that's what it would sound like to me.
Okay. I mean, I would be in favor of that. I think as long as the other businesses down there understand that they can, they can use it, that their patrons can use that as well. It's not just solely for one business, just because it may be closest to the eatery that's right next door to it or whatever.
I think we can also probably take it, periodically, because if there's a point at the summer that the governor isn't going to hound restaurants anymore and let them open at 100%, then it might be a more of a moot point. But
I think if we do it, we're going to have it throughout the season. I don't think that it's something, if the governor goes to 100%, that you can pull the plug on it in the middle of the season. I really don't. Now, the one thing that Pat Miller, he has in here May 1st in his email, but he doesn't say through when. And I think that would be good to know. And I just would remind everyone that when we voted to do that last year, it was because we were in the height of COVID, that we said that Heritage Plaza would be the place to move this, but the construction was going on. So I just think we need to keep some of these things in mind. This is a work session, so we're not going to vote on this tonight. Am I right?
Yeah.
Correct. So just some things we need to think about. I think it would be good to know how long they'd be looking to do this through. And I just want to be clear, and I look at our solicitor for this because of COVID, weren't there some, didn't they relax certain things with the LCB code?
Yeah, they did.
Because we had to, in turn, make changes to our open container.
They
Am I correct?
Yeah, they permitted licensed establishments to basically sell drinks to go, which under normal circumstances you couldn't under the state's open container law. But because of the impact, the restrictions we're having on bars and restaurants, that was kind of one of the gives from Harrisburg. Now they put very strict standards on it. It had to be sealed. You were not allowed to crack the seal in your car. Like if you cracked the seal in your car, you could, you can say, well, I bought a legal to-go drink, so I'm consuming it. You can't do that. So yeah, it was relaxed to a point, yes.
But then didn't we have to do something with our ordinance? Or am I confusing it with something else?
You're confused. I think, I don't know if this is.
You're allowed to tell me I'm confused.
No.
I won't be upset.
I think the question is in regards to Levity Brewing. I don't know if that's what we're talking about.
No, this was strictly the seating on 14th Street.
My understanding is you sell it to go. It's a sealed, it's a sealed container. I don't think that would specifically mean I can crack it as I'm walking down the street. Outside of a special event.
Yeah.
So when this happened last year, the city absorbed all the cost. The city provided the tents. Because of the exigent circumstances, we didn't try to do any kind of cost recovery. So I don't hate to be the guy that was bringing up what we're paying for it. What's that? Well, we had crews. We had the day labor to set everything up and establish the barriers. I think last year we purchased the barriers. In the time, the labor, the person hours to set up the tents, and then at the end of the season to break everything back down again. So if it's the council's intent to create an area of public seating, one of the things I think would be beneficial is to make sure there's some kind of signage that says this seating is available to the public, because I think what it became last year was table service seating for one restaurant rather than sort of general public seating for anybody in the area. So, I mean, and certainly it's something we can absorb the cost again, but if the taxpayers are paying for all of it's the city's street, and if we're doing all the legwork and providing everything, then making sure people understand they can sit there without having to order from a particular restaurant, or that they can bring food from another establishment and sit there and eat. I think it'd be important to try to make sure that was clear. in the alternative, if someone wanted to lease that space because they wanted more exclusive use, I'm never against a new source of revenue.
Well, I don't know that you, I don't think that there was table service involved, because that would involve an extension of the licensed premises, would it not, Tom?
That was another scenario where they were relaxing it to a point too.
Okay.
They, it was a unique set of circumstances which required unique solutions, and that was kind of one of the unique circumstances they were dealing with.
The tents that were put up were the ones that we had because of the farmer's market.
Correct.
So now, when the farmer's market, and the intent is that the farmer's market is coming back this year, will they need those tents?
I don't know if the pavilion will be sufficient, or they'll want to have some tented areas as well.
I think that would be something good to have from Pat Miller as well, too, because
Did we happen to receive any traffic complaints, et cetera, with traffic flow in that area? Have we had any correspondence or dialogue with any of the other businesses that are in that area as well?
That's a good question.
Well, we haven't actually reached out to their businesses to find out how they feel about it. I can say that I don't know that we're back to anything next to normal in terms of traffic flow, because there's still, whether it's the schools being phased. At least my experience was before the COVID shutdown, downtown traffic was different than it was during it, and we've seen traffic volumes pick up. Generally, the only complaints we get about things related to road are potholes or plowing, so we don't really get complaints about road closures.
But to that, did we not have some people that raised some complaints about the alley, because they said if you were
Yes.
going to close the street,
Yeah.
the alley needed some repairs
Yeah.
because the alley was in pretty bad shape?
Yeah, we did hear that before the closure.
And did we address that, or can we address that?
Well, I think it was taken care of, but I'll defer to Nate
Okay.
on that in terms of but I think that changed here. Yeah. Nate gave me the big thumbs up, so apparently the
Okay.
alley is passable.
Okay. The other thing I think that we may want to take a look at, Maren, is maybe, this is certainly a temporary thing, but the possibility of doing something long-term to create more, something down there that's a little more, permanent and, so, and
Yeah.
that might help
Yeah, it would.
from a long-term perspective, because we are getting some eateries, some things that want to, they want to do some things there, so.
Right. And actually had that conversation with DCD before about doing that last summer, because they came in here and we had lunch downtown. They were saying that that could be eligible for a Keystone Communities grant. She said they funded some sort of streetscape project where they turned a portion of City Street into some sort of public space, gathering space, amenity in some downtown. So that could be an option there as well, somewhere down the future for sure.
You thinking like a pavilion top, something like what's in Heritage Park or something like that?
No, I don't really know.
I think that would be part of the discussion, Matt, would be, what does that look like? What kind of options would we have? And I know there's been a conversation, it might have been with the manager, we were talking about Cumberland, Maryland, where they've taken areas in their downtown and it's just basically open area, which is really pretty attractive, so.
Some of the Pittsburgh areas have done that too, with kind of a market feel.
It's nice, and it's going to draw more people outside and walk around. Do they still have the rooftop seating? Is that a go? Was that okay? That rooftop seating there right beside it?
Not yet.
No.
I'll see your microphone. It's not.
Sorry. What I was asking was, so the restaurant beside where we were talking about possibly looking into doing something permanent there, if they had that rooftop seating, if that actually went through on it.
I have no idea. I don't know anything about rooftop seating in the downtown.
That's at Hadley's. That was initially their intent, was to have seating
Right.
on the roof of the building. but that hasn't happened yet.
That
right?
hasn't
So they haven't
materialized yet.
got an
Oh, yeah.
occupancy permit or anything for that yet either.
Well,
so-
they opened and then they did a soft opening and then the world blew up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just sticking on the subject of if we had any complaints down there, anything with, any complaints at all really about that seating right there on 14th? Any kind of concern with people that weren't really wanted, kind of showing up and,
Well,
if you know what I'm trying to say?
I think,
Was there any complaints with that?
much like we do with the land development, I think the way to find out is probably to send a mailing to the property owners or the businesses downtown and ask them, because I think a lot of business owners get pretty busy just doing their business, and I think a lot of them don't want to complain because they don't want to be seen as throwing rocks at a fellow business. But I certainly think if you wanted to get public input, we could do a mailing on anybody who we think would be affected by that and say, listen, if you've got any questions, concerns, or comments, please let us know. We can get that mailing out relatively quickly. And I think that when we did that ahead of the land development plan at the Vipon building, the downtown business owners appreciated being asked how they felt about it. I don't think that's a bad thing to do in this
I think
case.
we should include them and the folks up like Lou Schmidt's office, the Lutheran church, because they have a daycare there where children are being dropped off in the morning and afternoons there.
We can make it as wide as you'd like in terms of, I think,
And I
anyone
think that
who we
whole-
think would be impacted by that.
Yeah, that whole area, that whole block or
Yeah.
so. And who
Well-
knows? Maybe we didn't have any complaints reported to the city because small businesses were really in dire straits to survive last year.
This summer will tell the story more than last
Well,
summer.
the other thing was, again, it was something we did as you know, as a temporary measure because of the circumstances. You know, now people might have a different opinion, saying, well, you're doing it again, but we're coming out of things. And so, I mean, I just think it's good to do that kind of a temperature check.
Mhm.
So,
Well, and to hearkening to Councilman Kelly's point, I think a large part of the justification I recall was that Heritage Plaza was not only unavailable, it was under construction and completely, sealed off. So with the pavilion being done in that public seating, and clearly they're pretty proximate between Heritage Plaza and that section of 14th. So, and we also don't know, the farmers market wasn't going, so when events start ramping up at Heritage, we don't fully appreciate the impact of what the closure of 14th is going to have vis-a-vis the events happening at Heritage Plaza either.
well, and there will be a Memorial Day parade downtown. The 4th of July race was relatively small last year because of the way they staged it. It's going to take place again. There's going to be some other events, so we've got some time here.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be the Grinch that stole Christmas by any stretch of the imagination. So, but I think there also might be some long-term things that we want to look at for the downtown that would be a real enhancement. But so,
Perhaps after this summer, if we see how it goes, we may want to consider a long-term deal there throughout the summers.
who from council's on the GATE Act board?
Myself and
Oh, yeah.
Councilman Butterball.
Yep.
So are they no longer going to do concerts in Heritage Plaza like they did before?
No, the GATAC hasn't put those on in about.
Well, they kind of went
2
away, and then
summers?
COVID hit, and then
Well,
yeah.
It was the Altoona Mirror was hosting those for the past 2. I believe that's the plan this summer is to continue those again.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a huge concert series across the street from 2 of the railroaders.
Be Alive at 5.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything about that yet. So, okay. So you think it's safe to put this on the agenda for the first meeting in April then? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And Ken, can we task you with getting some of those answers back from
Sure.
Pat?
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
Pat Miller sent an email today as I forwarded to you, so we'll get back with the content of this conversation. We'll also try to get that mailing out before the end of the week to give downtown businesses a chance to get some feedback and comments to us.
Really, what we should get is an email list of the downtown businesses, and that way we could do this a lot more efficient.
Yeah, we can ask people for their, when we do actually have some of the emails from a previous iteration, so we can try to
Well, I'm
wrangle
presuming
that
there'll
up.
be an Altoona Mirror and Channel 10 story on this too. So
Well, that might generate some interest.
Yeah.
And this summer is going to be interesting because with the vaccines coming out now and with more vaccines on the way, things are going to open up exponentially here, perhaps in a month or so too.
All right.
On the Heritage Plaza issue, there was an event over the weekend hosted by Levity Brewery. We ironed out a couple wrinkles on the gathering permit, but we do have an odd situation between how we do the permit process. Tom's done a good job of trying to wander his way through the LCB rules and regulations, but our open container law is, I think, in somewhat stark contrast to sort of where I guess I see the city going with being able to allow events with alcohol in the downtown core. So what I felt like, at least when it comes to Heritage Plaza, I think it's probably worth discussing, how do you see that being used? How often do you want it to be permitted to a single private entity? So in other words, if it becomes a regular event venue for Levity, is that okay, or do you want to preserve more of a public space there? And then when it comes to alcohol use in public areas, do you want us to take a look at making sure our open container law and the state laws, which are way too confusing for me to understand, to try to get these to fit together? Because if these microbreweries are a thing and they want to do events, I'd like to try to kind of figure out philosophically where the council is, so we're facilitating things in a way that you think is consistent with your vision of how they should happen.
So how does that work, Tom? Because in the past, when they've done concerts, this was like the wing-offs. I mean, they used someone's special occasion permit, which at the time, I think you had certain nonprofit entities that were allowed to get so many special, I think it was probably 6 per year. And in some cases, they would use more than one organization to do those events. So how does this work? Because, I mean, the LCB used to be very tough about extension of licensed premises and serving alcohol.
Well, yeah, and what I ended up doing, I contacted the chief counsel from the Liquor Control Board relative to that, and basically with the liquor code, it's very fact specific. In this particular instance, the alcohol is being sold from a licensed premises. It was not being sold or distributed, in Heritage Plaza. Therefore, their position was a special license or special event license was not needed down in Heritage Plaza. Now, it would be if you're selling, my understanding with concerts in the past, like you were just alluding to, they would be selling alcohol in Heritage Plaza, which did require a special permit, and there is a whole list of who can, who can't, for what purpose, and I won't bore you with those details. So, in this instance, because Levity Brewing, they had a brewery license, what they were allowed to do as far as selling from, only in their place, as long as it wasn't happening off their licensed premises where they're selling it, the information I received was that was sufficient. Then it comes into the open container law, which our open container law basically allows an exception for, a large gathering permit, a special event permit under the city code. That's different from the special event permit for the PLCB. So, state open container law pertains to, in your car having an open container. Open container walking on the street is dependent upon the ordinance of the local municipality. And we do have that, but there is a provision in there which does allow, there can be an exception if, hey, someone puts in a permit for an event and if the city grants it, there can be kind of a temporary exception in that instance. So, did I answer your question?
Okay, yeah, so they were selling from the premises then, but
They
they
were
could
selling
go
from the-
over and you could drink there. then.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
So-
That was
It's
the,
so, it's so far from the premises, if I remember correctly, too. You can't just buy something at, you know, one of the downtown breweries and they catch you walking with a, you know, an open bottle of whiskey up over 17th Street and.
Right, I mean,
You know, you have to have, it's within a certain.
the way, yeah, one of the things for a special event under the city code, if it's granted, it's got to be cordoned off, it's got to be barrier off, like you can't just have people wandering willy-nilly.
Can't be in the middle of the street.
Exactly, you
Yeah.
know, like there kind of has to be like a designated area, as to where it's.
But you can be in the middle of the street if the street is closed,
Closed,
off, though,
yeah.
right?
Right. So like, there were, like I said, the city code does have specifications relative to, like, if someone puts in one of these a request for such an event, you know, what are the considerations the city looks at? What are the certain requirements the applicant has to meet? Things of that nature. And like I said, with the PLCB issue, like I said, that's a separate matter from the city code, because at the end of the day, if there's a PLCB violation, that's going to fall back on the license holder, you know, and that's not going to fall back on the city. So if a license holder does something in violation of their license, the PLCB is going to be knocking on their door.
Mhm.
So I think, you know, it's really important if, you know, to the extent, you know, there are licensed entities looking to do events or whatever, quite frankly, as to whether or not they fall in compliance with their particular license, it would really behoove them to consult with their own counsel,
Yeah.
who handles their PLCB issues, to make sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's.
Right. Yeah, I would be in favor of kind of looking at our laws and making sure that that they all line up in a way that allows, you know, events like this to happen without, you know, any sort of gray area or, you know, red tape or things like that. I'm not really in favor of limiting who can apply for, you know, to use the plaza or anything like that. I think, you know, it's a public plaza or public space. I think if somebody wants to use it, they should be able to use it.
But I think, you know, in line with what you're saying though, Mayor, that we should be able to say that we would limit alcohol, if Heritage Plaza is the focus of the event, that we would limit the consumption of alcohol maybe to a certain area. Is that part of what you're talking about?
I mean,
Well, it's already limited to Heritage Plaza when an event happens there.
Yeah, I think what I was talking about, Councilman, was under the code, it talks about if one of these special event permits is granted, that there's sufficient barricading or cordoning off of the area where the event is taking place, so that, as mentioned before, you don't have people like wandering in the streets or wandering into adjacent properties, things like that. That there's some type of, you know, crowd control,
Okay.
like via barriers type thing. So.
I guess my concern also is that when a facility, a public facility becomes more popular, then you get multiple requests for use, then you have the transition where, okay, well, you know, these people left it a mess, and now we're having the farmer's market this morning, and we're picking up, you know, cans, and we're doing this, or if somebody wants to reserve it, but another entity has it booked for, like, you know, 3 Saturdays in a row, just trying to make sure that the resources being allocated fairly and equitably, as opposed to, you know, because, you know, the more popular it gets, the more there's going to be the potential
Demand
for
for it,
conflicts
yeah.
between different users. So, I mean, I think as opposed to wait for the call from someone saying, "Hey, why, the plaza's a mess. Why didn't you guys pick it up?" I think it's good to get it ahead of that in terms of thinking about how we resolve those conflicts.
I mean, possibly, but this summer isn't going to be the first summer that we're having events at Heritage Plaza, though. I mean, last year we didn't have any because of the pandemic, but, you know, prior to last year, this is something that we've been doing at Heritage Plaza for decades, and I think that,
Well,
you
we
know,
did
it
have a
doesn't-
microbrewery downtown within 2 doors down, and another major project starting. I mean, if we talk about the economic activity, it seems like it's somewhat different. And the pavilion, I think, changes the character of it as well, having a covered pavilion there. And part of the microbrewery model is to have an event-based
I mean,
you know.
yes, but Levity is also not the first brewery in downtown either. So I don't see this being an issue of worrying about the cleanup of the plaza when we've been having, before last year, we've been having events there every summer. A lot of them every Friday and Saturday throughout the summer.
Well, one thing I could add is, under the city code as it exists, in the whole permit application review process, depending upon the nature of the event, if the city says, hey, we can approve this with the following conditions, we have the ability under the code as it currently exists to grant a conditional permit. We'll give it to you, but you got or put some type of prevent or protections in place to ensure those types of things, or I mean,
Well, who is typically down there? Like, in years past when we would have the Jazz Fest, we'd close off the street. Who's physically there barricading the streets? Is it our public works? Is it?
When it comes to barricading
APD.
streets, it normally falls to either APD or Public Works.
So is that the process of? Forgive me, is that the process for if I were downtown and I wanted to close off that street to have an event and I wanted to get in touch with the codes office to have my permit pulled and accepted? Is that the next step in that process that I'm following up with the APD on how I'm barricading and how far out it is, or are we as the city, are we specifying that to them, to the people applying for the permit?
my understanding is
asking.
when one of these applications comes in, it basically, in the review process, it goes through each department, basically for their own review and consideration. Ken, you can
Yeah, I mean,
correct me if I'm wrong.
Kim's the one who really manages that process, so she makes sure it goes to fire, to police, to Public Works. Most of the permits we do don't involve closing public roads, though. Right?
No, not always.
Yeah,
They
so,
don't want the roads closed because they want to keep them open. The businesses ask us
Yeah.
not to close the roads, so.
Yeah, we prefer
These
not to
tries
close
to
roads.
not.
we have block parties occasionally, right? And we have,
Not on 11th. I mean,
Not really.
11th Avenue, we try not to close the road because of the businesses.
Yeah, 14th Street isn't as much of an issue, but 11th Avenue is, because we have businesses and we have folks that use those businesses that can't, walk as much or aren't able to maneuver.
so, I guess, I understood Councilman Kashadi's question to be more like events throughout the city, so not just the central business district, but we get gathering permits or events from people that want to do something in Juniata or something in Allegheny Furnace, like we're going to do this thing. We have a memorial service coming up, isn't that? I just signed something for a memorial service, which involves some kind of gathering, but I just wanted to make sure, because the alcohol rules, just trying to make sure that we try to understand where you want us to go with this stuff. We'll process things administratively. We also want to be conscious of the fact that when we're putting, whether it's Public Works or APD out, I mean, there's an expense to the city to set up, to break down, to do all the stuff that we do, and we don't really have a cost recovery mechanism in place at this point to, if somebody's having a jazz fest, I guess, it's not like we're saying, well, many cities will say, okay, this is the overtime cost. If we're going to have to police, we're going to get something to cover our costs here. So just something to think about.
And one of the things I always like to say, if you want to know what it's like to live in a fish tank, don't ask the fish. And we live here, like, we're seeing the growth every day. We don't realize how much downtown has grown and how much more attractive it has become. And I was reminded the other day, because I got a call from a friend. He's like, hey, Dave, I want to give you some good news. Somebody came to visit, and he took them downtown to eat, and their guest was like, wow, I haven't been here for like 6 years, and this is completely different. This is so much nicer, and there's people, and there's more shops, and so it's almost like when you're watching your child grow, but like an aunt or an uncle that only sees them once every 2 years or every so many years. Wow, look how much has been done. And so it's encouraging to get those calls. And so growing wisely is certainly something we want to keep an eye on. I want to encourage people walking around downtown, though, too. I want to be careful with the barriers. I want to be a little careful with how we do something like that, because I want people walking around town, exploring, going to the different businesses. Take a walk around 2 or 3 blocks. Get to check out the place and see what all is there, because there's a lot more there now.
Yeah, yeah. That's definitely the next step is walk. I don't think you'd want to entertain. I wouldn't want to entertain any kind of permanent barricades. I mean, I know we're talking about 14th Street being temporary and possibly going in permanent. You know, after this year as a true litmus test to that. But yeah, I think I agree, Councilman Boudoir, or Vice Mayor Boudoir. I think I think walking around is the next step. 8 years ago, you couldn't give downtown away. I hate to say it like that, but you really couldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, now businesses want to be down there. It's starting to come to life a little bit, and when you're down there walking around, it's nice.
And not just right there, like between City Hall and 17th Street. There's more coming in on the outskirts now too, and so we want people to be able to walk there and spend a few shekels at the various businesses around.
I think for me, the big concern would always be someone providing liability insurance and also cleanup.
Well, I know under the permit application, they are required to provide certificate of insurance listing the city as an additional insured. So that is part of it. And like I said, the city wants to make a condition of it, like you have to have, contract in place with so-and-so or someone who's going to clean the area or something. I mean, you certainly can do that.
And I like the special events, and it's great having special events down there, but my goal is to get to the point where downtown is the constant event, is the constant place to be. Not just going downtown because this is going on or that's going on, but going downtown because that's the place people like to go all the time.
Okay.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Okay. Move on to engine bay floors bid for the Altoona Fire Department.
Under the code, I'm required to let the council know that when a low bid has not been accepted, so we had a bid process. Chief Heilman recommended that the 2 lowest bids were not responsible. In other words, they didn't meet the technical requirements of the bid specs. I mean, an apparatus bay floor is a fairly technical job in terms of flooring, so I notified both those vendors in writing. Not only is it a requirement of the law, but in case one of those vendors complains to you that they weren't awarded the bid, you can refer them to me.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody have anything on that? No.
Nope.
All right.
When is the next bid then? Is that something coming up soon or wait a while?
We just selected a bidder that wasn't the low bidder. That the work
I
is,
got you.
the
I
work
got
is
you.
going to be awarded.
Sorry about that.
Okay, moving on to next item, amendment to a lease agreement for Tower Alliance for the Altoona Water Authority.
What this pertains to, there's been a lease agreement on, it's property of that the Water Authority leases from the city relative to tower rental. This goes back, the original lease is 1998. It's been amended a few times. The most recent amendment, I reviewed it. I think it's very beneficial. Locks in longer period of rentals. It provides a 2% annual increase with a 10-year guarantee. I don't see any problem with this. The Water Authority is ready to do it, but technically, since the city owns the property,
We have to sign off
they
on
need
it.
they just need a consent on it.
But they're the ones that receive the financial remuneration.
Right. The rentals go to the Water Authority, but since the city owns it, they just wanted basically a consent.
So do we need to take action on this at our next meeting?
I would just probably put a resolution on just to approve
Okay.
it.
Okay.
So.
I think that's fine to add that to the next meeting.
Sounds good.
Take it, Dave.
Okay, moving on to item D.
So-
CDBG.
So one of the things that Mayor Pacifico asked last year was for the council to see the list of projects recommended before the list came to council for approval, which would presumably occur soon. So we sent that list. I trust that you have that list before you, but community development block grant money is federal money. It has an incredible amount of strings attached to it, but ultimately it's money that's given to the city, and it's supposed to be used to further projects of importance to the city, which, you know, you're the people who are elected to make those decisions. So want to make sure that if you have thoughts on priorities, projects, I think there are more grant funds requested than available, which is not unusual for CDBG, but also Carl Fisher is here, probably in the back room. So if Carl would like to step out and be available to answer any questions that you might have about any of these projects. Going to see if that Carl's listening. And lo and behold. Thanks, Carl.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I think that one's on all the time, I believe.
That one's on all the time.
We're gonna talk right into it, Carl.
All right. Have you had a chance to look at this at all? Well, what we have here is approximately $2.7 million in applications. We have approximately $1.7 million available. So I basically put a spreadsheet together for Ken to pick and choose, projects that you may or may not want to support. And if you have any questions about any particular projects, I'd feel be obligated to give you the information that I have available to me. I've put a summary together which basically states what these projects are, in what categories that they qualify under, because we have certain parameters that we have to fall under. We have caps that we have to follow. Slum and blight rules, 30%. Let me get my, I should have brought my other paperwork with me. 20% for admin, 30% for slum and blight activities. A minimum of 70% of the activities have to benefit low mod individuals, 15% for public services. So you'll see those categories listed on the right-hand side of the summary sheet. The requests are there below the green column, and the overall project request, or I should say the overall project costs when listed are there as well.
So a couple of broad observations. One is the paperwork on these grants is really intense. So I personally am not a big fan of small grants. Like I know there's one for $2,700, one for $5,000. The way the federal government looks at it is you end up doing the same mountain of paperwork for $5,000 as you do for $5 million. So administratively, I mean, there's a couple of things here where I'd say, if you think they're worthy projects, I'd recommend the city fund it out of general funds and roll the CDBG funds in something bigger, because we're just going to spend a lot of time dealing with a very small project. So I think it's a lot better to work with things that are bigger lumps of money holistically. I mean, I certainly know, certainly Mary and Carl do a good job wrangling the paperwork, but I'm an efficiency guy, and I think some of these real small things are just not a terribly efficient use of the grant funds. We're going to be talking about sidewalks and demo programs, so I guess these two things dovetail in pretty neatly. But as I read this list, the demo program, which has historically been funded through Community Development Block Grant, I don't see that on this list, so I guess this is presupposing that that program is going to be transitioning, Carl?
Well, the budget that was put together reflects the doing away with the demo program at this point in time. The demo crew, I should say.
And then this would be using some of the money, which is the $210,000. I guess we would be using a private contractor to demo that, as opposed to the, maintaining a two-person crew. Although that's still an issue that we need to discuss with the union in terms of the disposition. We have one worker retiring. One worker is going to be able to work temporarily in Public Works, but we'll have to sit down with the union because they will want. They'll have a vested interest in preserving those jobs in one form or another, which will lead to the discussion, I guess, of the sidewalk program. But I think it's going to take us a while to sort out what that program looks like. So
It looks like there's some on this request summary for sidewalk projects.
those would be done like the Cherry Avenue sidewalk, I think, is one that Nate Kissel has talked about, and he can probably answer a few questions if you had specific about that. I think that's one of the projects that he discussed with me. But I think that'd be entirely work we would job out to a contractor as opposed to do in-house.
Yeah. But we would still be, and I'm new, and I know I'll only be able to use that excuse for perhaps another period of time, but, you know, are we, I guess what I'm asking, we are eligible to use these funds to do projects like that?
In low to mod.
In low to mod
Yes.
neighborhoods?
That's correct.
I believe the maps on our website, where it gives the areas, it shades the areas that are eligible. And then if you do want to do a project outside of those areas, you may have to do like a special study, like we did on Broad Avenue
A survey,
when the
yes.
tree buckle took place. And so we did the special study to get that streetscape done and was eligible for funding there.
The tree buckle, that's not something
No,
I've
the
heard.
tree buckle was when they came through and were given the instructions on a piece of paper that
was a
you need
gift.
to be standing on the curb and see the sky. So they just went down through and chop a doodle dude.
The PennDOT's
Another technical
subcontractor
term.
who was supposed to do tree trimming before they did paving on Broad Avenue went in and you could have flown F-14s down Broad Avenue the way they trimmed the trees. I mean, it was
I think it was
pretty
good,
bad.
actually.
Ethel on 26th Street put a post on Facebook and it like completely blew up. By Monday morning, we were out there with all kinds of officials, and I remember Mayor Sheriff and I we had an arborist and everything, and taking a tour of the neighborhood and seeing what we were going to do, and then of course the rest is
But this was after the trees were already cut.
It was too late.
yeah.
Oh, it was, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they said don't look, Ethel, but it was too late.
Well, do you have any questions about any of the projects specifically, or any comments that you would, because ultimately what we'd like to do is be able to have you provide the guidance on what you think is more or less important in terms of funding priorities.
I have I guess a more broad question. Are all of these eligible projects at this point?
Yes.
Even the one, it looks like it would be one home. Can an individual homeowners?
Well, I didn't know where to, actually fit that in under
Mhm.
what code it would actually fit into. Could have been under the housing, which I did place it under there. It could be under an ADA code.
Where are you seeing that, Joe? I'm sorry.
We would have to make sure that that individual meets the criteria, income eligibility. There's legwork to be done there. The actual activity, and this is going to be done by volunteers. They're going to be doing it. I see more costs that would probably be associated with it, because in there I only see the materials. I don't see permits. I don't see, we will have to address affected areas for lead-based paint. There's some other costs that they have not considered. So we would have to
I actually just didn't know if individuals, like would qualify for CDBG, like something that would just impact one individual.
It could.
Okay.
Possibly.
Mr. Fisher, that under line item 21, under the housing strategy there,
Yes.
so that single family, I'm sorry, line item 24, single family rehab loan, that $340-some thousand, is that are those the rehab loans to the elderly people that live in the city that apply for, they have to, it's income based and they have to apply for, housing needs to be in compliance with code?
Yes, it is.
that what
It
that
is income based primarily. It has to be income based, is what it is. We do, the majority of the rehabs are for elderly individuals. We offer a deferred loan for individuals that are 62 and or over, and they have to be the owner of the property. But yes, that's what those.
Okay.
That has been an excellent program over the years to stave off and eliminate blight.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of folks have taken advantage of that, and it's probably one of our best kept secrets, in a sense. And you've done a really good job administering that.
Thank you.
Do we use all those? To that point, have we had enough? I mean, have we exhausted those funds per year?
We still have some of last year's funds. We've reduced our request this year to compensate for what we don't have committed. So we keep that on a rolling basis as to what we need. With COVID last year, we haven't had as much money go on the street as possible as we typically would have. We're having problems getting inspectors into the properties. We're having problems with the folks having COVID. It's been tough. We have a lot of contracts that are sitting there that we still need to get up and running with, to start the projects that were closed last year. And I have probably 6 that need to be contracted right now that we're going out to bid with. So yes, we commit it, and we generally spend it out each year.
Okay. So it is. I mean, it's known enough in the community that we're using.
There's nothing laying there.
So, a note of explanation too, that the admin percentage of 20% is the funds that pay Carl's salary, Mary's salary, Frank and JT's salary. I think, and let's make a note to myself to ask for the breakdown, because we've made some reductions in community development. There may be some, we may not have a full $351,000 of admin.
Okay, just a point of clarification on that for Jim and Frank's salary, the rehab specialist.
Their home?
That actually comes out as program delivery. 90% of that is
Okay.
program delivery. That doesn't come out of the admin column. We do some for labor compliance, Jim does, but all that's coming out of the single-family rehab program.
So at this point, it's you and Mary, and what other expenses would hit admin then?
Well, we basically have, I think it's to the tune of $250,000. We have an inter-office budget that we put together. So we would take any other costs. We have our lead-based paint testing, and I'm trying to think what else we have there. Pay salaries, for Mary and I, and at one time we had a larger staff,
Yeah.
naturally.
I'm just saying though, if there's 351 of admin that might be available for programmatic uses, I mean, that's
Sure.
the maximum you can take in admin, but if you don't have that much admin expenses, that may release funds for other projects.
Yeah. By budget, we could reduce that to $250,000 and put the balance into projects, yes.
Very nice.
The home admin is 10% of the overall grant, which is $35,000, which isn't a whole lot. That typically goes to pay toward my salary. And as far as the compliance, the home is kind of a heavily regulated program. There's a lot of paperwork to be done on that particular project. And the balance of my money comes out of the admin, CDBG admin, and Mary is full-time CDBG admin.
On the Housing Authority project, is the Housing Authority paying the other $500,000? So CDBG,
They show that they have that in their capital budget. This has been an ongoing project. We've funded this several years prior to. We just finished up last year's funds this past fall, I believe.
I take it you're all familiar with the Fairview Hills project.
Yes.
Well, if you have any feedback you'd like to provide before the meeting in terms of ranking or priorities, because ultimately we have to go back and we have to fit the funding under the cap. I mean, we can't award more funds than we have, and that means something's going to have to be trimmed somewhere. So, any guidance you can provide in that, because we certainly want to bring.
When would you like to have that by?
When do we have to? When's the council have to adopt it in May?
We have, well, no, it has to go, on the schedule, we have to have it in the paper by April 5th. That's a proposed budget. Then it will go to council meeting in May. I don't know the exact date.
I think April 1st.
Okay,
We just followed April 3rd budget before April 1.
thank you.
Before the end of the month?
Okay.
Well, that will be, April 1 is not for council, that's just the proposed budget.
I'm just saying for our purposes, trying to get a sense of where the council wants to go with this, the sooner, obviously, the better.
Okay.
I know it's a short window, April 1 will give us enough time to get it to the Altoona Mirror and have it posted.
When it's
Published.
when it's published in the paper, then is it project specific at that
It will be
point?
projects.
Okay,
specific,
so we
yeah.
really have to get that
It will
input
have to be
into
within the budget.
like
yes.
right away.
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Okay.
it's what, the 22nd of March.
Okay.
It looks like the city departments themselves are requesting more than the total budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's because of how little that we've been able to find in general funds or capital funds to spend on infrastructure. It's a little unusual for CDBG money to be used for this much street reconstruction, but lacking other resources. I think that's kind of what we've backed into doing.
And I think we've talked about this at public meetings before, but I mean, I think anything that we can do to improve the streetscape and neighborhoods in our community is important.
I generally agree. It just struck me. It looks like we're requesting 1.79 roughly.
Yeah, so clearly,
out of 1.75.
clearly, if the direction is that fund the people who've asked and then figure out within the city to make our priorities, we can do that, and then we can reduce the requests from internal departments. But yeah, Mark Twain once quipped that everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. Well, the same can be said for infrastructure. I mean, we for years it's been crumbling infrastructure, roads, bridges, and we never seem to get around to actually investing in infrastructure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a valuable use of the use of the money. It was just,
It's coming.
yeah.
It's the next round.
Okay.
Rick Geist said that for years when he was state rep. Everybody wants to talk about the stuff everybody wants to talk about, and infrastructure just isn't the interesting conversation in the room, but it's necessary.
But if your general direction is try to satisfy the complaint from external stakeholders and then balance the budget, reduce our internal requests to meet the demand, we'll do that.
Could the Nehemiah project request? I see the last sentence that says funding will pay staff to help with food preparation. I don't know how much that money would go towards staff, but $170,000 seems like it would buy a lot of takeout containers and plasticware.
This is basically a continuation. They received
You received money last year, too.
COVID dollars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which they're anticipating finishing that out and picking up with this project after that. Let me just take a look here once.
The other list, which we haven't given to you but occurs to me that might be valuable, is all of the funding that's been previously allocated and not spent. Because that's something that I keep track of, is who's been given money and hasn't spent it yet, because that tends to influence who I
Yeah.
would give money to in the future.
Yeah, going
Yeah.
forward, that will be,
We'll have that list to you before the end
Yeah, I
of the
don't
week.
have an exact breakdown as to what is going toward admin, and we have that in our COVID-19 application. They keep referring to the COVID-19 application through this, but they didn't give us as much of a budgeted or detailed budget.
Ken, so you said you'd get us that list by when?
By the end of the week.
Okay.
That's something I've asked. Now, Mary is out
Okay.
on medical leave temporarily, so I trust Carl can get the list of the unspent balances of previous CDBG awards. I've got one from last year. I just didn't think to get it updated for this
Yeah, so-
work session.
You get that to us, and in a perfect world, we need to get back to you with comments on this by next Friday then, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yep.
Maybe like Friday morning.
It's actually going to be Thursday because I think we're off on Friday.
Good Friday, all right, thanks, Carl, for reminding me. Oh my gosh, holy shades of jelly bean and Easter bread, right? I forgot about that. So,
Well,
Yeah.
and it just, the project about which we last spoke reminded me that's, we've had issues occasionally with people not spending allocations
Right.
and asking for more.
right,
So, curiosity question: what happens to that? Like, do they get to keep that money? Is that
No.
No.
Okay?
That's all through HUD, correct?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Now,
that's very
the
stringent.
Nehemiah project, in their budget, they did put, there's corporate and private donors of $103,000 approximately to go against the $170,000 request that they have submitted to us. So leveraging wise, that's a fair return.
so unspent funds to
Yes.
council by Friday, then I'd say by next Wednesday, we need to be back in touch with you with any comments we have,
Sure.
then, right? Okay, and then we'll go to press then, so to speak.
Well, I believe it's not fixed in stone that if something came up, you can amend.
Right, it's a proposed budget.
It's a
yes.
proposed
Right,
budget,
right.
so it's
But
not.
you've got deadlines to meet with advertising, so, yeah, okay.
But this is, and the applications just came in earlier this month for the deadline, so I apologize for the truncated amount of time, but you try to give people as much time as you can, I guess, to prepare their applications. We only recently found out what the award was from HUD in terms of how much money was available, so it compresses things. But to Mayor Pacifico's earlier point, I hope we satisfied the intent of seeing this and being able to think about it before it actually appears on the council agenda.
Absolutely.
No, that's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Moving on to the sidewalk demo program.
Well, the demo program at this point is planned to transition out, and but what we need to do is figure out how to fund the sidewalk program moving forward, and we're in the middle of a budget cycle. I mean, we won't start preparing the next budget until probably starting in late August, early September. So as much as I'd like to stand something up sooner, we need to figure it out. Plus, we need to, I think, talk to the union, possibly go through collective bargaining to establish what we can do, because we had this existing program. Now we need to basically, if we want to use a internal crew to do sidewalks, hammer out a deal with AFSCME to what that looks like. So my sense is that you'd like the city to build some sidewalks. I'd like to look at CDBG money as a way to do that in the future. It's just going to take us a little while to put that together. So
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that comes up a lot of times when you're just speaking to people about
Sidewalks are
town.
horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, they're horrible. And in some places, they don't even, there's no curbing left,
well, it's
and
thematically, and not to be the person who's counting federal chickens before they're hatched. And I waited for Councilman Ickes to leave the room so his skull would not explode. But we do stand to gain some money that could be used for infrastructure. And I think, thematically, I'm 100% about infrastructure investment. So a relatively small amount would allow us to at least ramp up a program and then transition to CDBG funding, because there will be equipment that has to be acquired. There's gonna be some setup costs, but and ideally would like to do is, if we have our own crew, have our crew train alongside flat work professionals to do some jobs cooperatively, so our staff could get up to speed, because when a sidewalk is right, people don't notice it, but when there's something wrong with it, it's there for a really long time.
Right.
So it behooves us to get good sidewalks.
In some of the sidewalks in the city, it's really easy to notice that there's something wrong with them because they look like skateboard ramps or reverse skateboard ramps.
Or they're brick
sidewalks
like
are-
underneath ripped up concrete. Yeah.
The old brick sidewalks are really bad. Not to bring up a point that none of us feel like talking about again, but in order to do something with these sidewalks, we're gonna have to take care of the issue of the trees.
That is
first.
correct.
Yep.
Because if we do the sidewalks and don't do anything with the trees in 3 years or 5 years or even less,
Yeah, we have to be wise, because there's no use replacing sidewalks where there's maples and trees that are just going to do a number on them anyway.
Yeah, if you're gonna put in new sidewalks, you got to research the species of trees so that we're not planting something totally invasive again.
And to give credit
Have
where
to
it's
rip 'em out
due,
and-
our shade tree people did, when was it, like about 8 years ago or so, started realizing, hey, we'll put these species in, and it's where the roots go more straight down than out.
Are we required to put trees in sidewalks?
No.
Okay, well, I mean, it's central Pennsylvania. There's no shortage of trees around us.
Yep.
I mean, do we have to do that?
Another big problem is that they get around your water main coming in and your sewer mains.
They're
roots are
rather
deep enough they
invasive.
can push against the foundation wall.
I mean, I don't know. I personally think that I think cities that have street trees like that adds appeal. So I'm not totally opposed to that, but I think that they have to be the right tree.
Yeah, shallow root.
For full disclosure, I like trees in much the same way a rancher likes ribeye steaks. I mean, my family's been in the logging business for 6 generations, so they're a great renewable resource. I just think the issue is that even if you pick species real carefully, when you have overhead wires, underground utilities, curb lines, and everything else, no matter how carefully you pick them, there's going to be issues. And when they grow to the point where they have to be cut, you end up with tuning fork trees where the middles have been cut out. And we have no control over Penelec and how they do it. So I think when we take a look at corridors, I mean, the trees that are dead and problematic, I think it's an important investment to save, to remove them, and then just be careful about where trees are planted, preferably on the house side of a sidewalk, not on the road side of the sidewalk.
And we may be getting way ahead of you on this, because you've got a lot of things you have to do yet, and there's a lot of places in the city, older parts of the city, where there's no trees in the sidewalk. I mean, if you go over, in some of the older parts of the city, it's house, sidewalk, curb, and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And that's probably a lot of the places that really need some attention first. So
Well,
I think you need to put some more of this together. And
We're also looking at places, because it's not just sidewalks, but curbs are critical for drainage. Curbs help channel water. So what we want to do is look at areas where we can solve multiple layers of problems. We have some chronic flooding and water problems. Proper curbs and stormwater inlets could help solve those things. So it's not just the sidewalk for the sake of building a sidewalk. It's a sidewalk of being able to solve multiple problems. And we did a project where underneath the sidewalk we over excavated, put stone beds in to infiltrate, so all these sumps and the house drains coming down allowed the water to be captured underneath sidewalks, which allow the water to infiltrate as opposed to pond or create other problems. So we really want to take a look where we have our worst drainage problems and combine that with where people want to walk in terms of connecting places like our parks and other areas, particularly our downtown. So we just have to make sure every dollar solves more than one problem.
And there's still a lot of places in the city that do not have any sidewalks or any curbing. And,
I live in one.
Yeah, and we've also got some areas where the sidewalk is up in the air. I mean, it's just magically that there is no way in this day and age that it meets any kind of ADA at all. I mean, so it's noble, and I think we do need to do something about sidewalks, but I think we're going to be taking some baby steps and have to get.
But having done some large sidewalk projects, it's something that you see a different city when there's new curb, new sidewalk.
And you can see in areas like on Logan Boulevard or Plank Road where there was not sidewalk before, and we've put that in. It makes it gives it a whole different look to it.
Walgreens is probably a great example there.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Walgreens, what Chronix has done. I mean, and it just, we have places that you can see, but you can't walk to.
Yep.
There's no sidewalk, so.
Or it's illegal to walk.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you live in Garden Heights, it's illegal to walk outside your neighborhood practically.
Pretty much. Yeah.
We'll say PennDOT's been doing a better job though over the years.
Yes.
As they do intersection projects on the boulevard to add crosswalks in there.
And just a quick shout out on sidewalks. The Public Works crews are rotary brushing 6th and 7th because of the amount of anti-skid that PennDOT uses on those roads. So we're doing that in combination with street sweeping. I followed a street sweeper in this morning. After the streets have been swept and the sidewalks have been swept, looks great.
It does. I followed that street sweeper in today as well, and one of my biggest pet peeves was what I saw is the street sweeper weaving in and out of parked cars because we have nothing that that tells people to move their cars on street sweeping day so we can get a clean sweep right up to the curb someday. All right. Anything else on the sidewalks?
Nate's next.
All right. Moving on to Department of Public Works, possible embankment location.
Thank you, Mayor. We are currently very close to running out of room at our current embankment site down in Juniata. And so we have been exploring alternate areas that we can use. We currently have 3 potentials, and I guess whether I'm looking for a bless off or at least to let everybody know what we're thinking. I handed out paper for y'all to look at. Page 1 in that area shows some paper streets up from Westfall down to, I think that's 21st Avenue, up on the hill. So by the Penelec substation that you all so affectionately know because of the new 100-foot poles that are running up there. But so the first one, if you go to page 2, would be the area adjacent to Westfall Park, the outfield. And so what we're thinking there, embankment area, that would be our clean field that we use for all of our street operations, the broken up concrete, blacktop, everything classified as clean fill. We're looking to expand that area behind Westfall, neatly, of course, as one of the potential sites. It's close to town, not a long distance for the crews to get to, within sight of supervision to review, to keep an eye on it. There's a potential too in that same area of ground that we own that we could house a police impound there with some fencing and razor wire. It's shielded right now from the neighborhoods, so with some lighting we could definitely get some we have out at the highway yard, we have a lot of cars out there right now currently in impound, and that would help us. And that doesn't even take into account the cars that are just out of inspection or abandoned on the street. These are all cars, involved in a crime or something along those lines. So I talked to Chief Merrill, and he seemed to be okay with that. So that's kind of a secondary. We could do the embankment area without the impound, but just to show you there is a potential area there that we could use. And we have one out at Sugar Run. I didn't include that in your packet because it's a water authority property that we're going to look at doing a joint use spot out there that we could both use as an embankment area. But the last page you have there is Garfield Park. That area is behind the outfield fence on the practice field, and if we could fill that in for Blair Rec, then there's potential there that they could use that field for tournaments, which is now just practice field. So with some lighting and some upgrades there, moving the fence out, they could probably utilize that space a lot more. So
Nate, both of the areas at Westfall and Garfield, how much fill do you anticipate that each area could hold before you would have to look for a new spot?
I would say you could probably get 10,000 yards, and we would be in there for years.
Okay.
Garfield's not that big of an area because it falls off to a creek on the back side. That's all RA ground back through there behind it. But so Garfield would be the first one we would look at taking care of. There's some trees that we would have to clear out, and of course we have to do an ENS plan and submit for permits, and that process takes 6 to 8 months. So that's why I'm trying to get a jump on it here so we have some place to go to.
None of those would negatively impact any of the recreation that goes on there or disrupt any.
No, Councilman.
Okay.
It's behind we would access it off to the side, and then just, the end result would be once we would clean it up, then we would, we'd dress it up, put topsoil in, but
If anything, it would help recreation, right? Because it would make those fields suitable for bigger events, right?
Westfall's pretty big right now, but it would definitely help Garfield with softball and little league tournaments, things along those lines. They would give them another complete field almost. Where
No, you have to take that fence down. There's kind of a rickety old fence there around this, partially around this Garfield practice field. Would you take all that down? You're saying you'd clear all that out, clear out some trees, and extend that field with your.
I think once we got it up to grade, then we would pull it down and move it back. Get everything established.
Bring the fence down. So you'd have to take the fence down to be dumping back there.
No, we can leave it up and just work around the outside of it.
Oh.
So it's pretty rickety. That one's in bad shape there. A lot of the. So yeah, I think it's there are 3 relatively close areas to town, all kind of worked around, and we wouldn't clear out more than what we had to, but we'd definitely like to start the permit process there to see what we can do.
How steep is the embankment at Westfall?
Pretty steep.
Is it?
Same with Garfield.
I can't really tell from the topography of this
It's
map
probably
here.
a 1-to-1, like this, maybe a 2-to-1 slope on the backside. So what we would end up with would probably, there's a road there that we have to work with the neighbor is on a right, but they just have a right of way through our property, which it must have existed forever up through there.
So are you looking for which one do you want to start first?
I would say Garfield we would start first.
Yeah,
and then
that makes sense.
And then move to Westfall from there.
Well, certainly if we follow through with this sidewalks issue, we'd be adding to that fill then too, wouldn't we? So, okay.
And that would all be clean fill. So
You don't really need any action from council. This is just really informational, isn't it?
Yeah, just making sure that, because you may be asked about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
It's outside the city limits.
correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to Prospect Pool.
The pool needs between 8 and 10 lifeguards to open. They've received 1 application to date. I think part of the problem is that with COVID, the line of training to get certified as a lifeguard kind of dried up, no pun intended. So Mike Hofer's checking with Del Grosso's and some of the other neighborhoods or the other recreational facilities to figure out kind of where they are, but there's a fairly good chance we would not be able to, or CBRC won't be able to staff the pool to have it open. The bigger issue, and what I alluded to in my email, and hopefully the subject of a joint meeting with the CBRC board, is the pool needs a lot of work. and a lot of work would be expensive. So I think we're at a point where the pool and its useful life, there needs to be some kind of a plan, either to make a major capital investment to bring the facility up to standards, or something else. So, and Nate's been up there. He can fill you on some of the technical issues in terms of the leakage and, but because it's not ADA compatible now, once we start spending any money, everything's going to have to be converted to make it ADA compatible. I mean, it's like pulling a string on a sweater. And Mike doesn't feel like the lifeguard situation is not going to go away anytime soon. It's just, it's a tough job. It's tough to hire people to do that work in the summer, and
we're paying a good bit less than
yeah,
others in the market.
We're paying a couple dollars an hour less than Del Grosso's. But, and without wanting to get into specifics, I understand that if Prospect Park Pool doesn't open, it may not be the only facility not to open due to the lifeguard shortage.
So Nate, what are some of the...
So the bathhouse itself, when they upgraded the bathrooms a few years ago, they are ADA compliant, although they aren't ADA accessible. I don't know why that was, but I think just they upgraded the facilities inside, but there's no ramps to get into them. The pool itself, we had Eads go up with us, and we looked at the facilities. The pump house is in pretty bad shape. It needs some filtration. They had some filtration upgrades, I think Mike told me, in around 2005. But they definitely, the building being subjected to all the chemicals over the year, it's the steel beams are deteriorating pretty well. The pool itself loses water on a consistent basis, so throughout the summer they continually fill it, from the time they fill it to the time they shut it down and drain it. So the water's ice cold. It definitely is at the very minimum going to need a liner, probably within a year or two, just to function the way that it is. The liner's roughly $100,000. I would say by the time we get to it, you could figure every bit of $150. It doesn't take into account any of the accessibility issues or the fact that the pool is probably bigger than what it needs to be because of the declining, population or people that use it. So those are the main things. The building itself is in decent shape, but it does have some accessibility issues. But there's some different options there to look at. DCNR has some grants to apply for, but you have to have a study done the way DCNR wants you to do a study to fund, a project after the fact. They do offer a 50% grant to fund a study, so a study's probably $40,000 to look at it. And if they approve that, you could do the study, and then the next year, they would, at that point, if you had the study the way they wanted it to be done, then you could apply for funding. But it's a 50-50 match, and at that point, you're looking at ADA accessibility. I mean, you're probably at $1.5 million, give or take. So you'd be on the hook for $750. So the grant's $40, so you'd be on the hook for $20, and a project's probably $1.5, so you're on the hook for $750,000. So it's definitely it's
Who owns the
something,
pool? Is that owned by the city?
We own it. We own it, and Blair Rec maintains it for us. So, I mean, that's the tall and the short of it.
It's a lot of money to spend when you can't find any lifeguards to, you can't have staff.
Yeah.
It comes down to that simple equation. The maintenance of the pool is only getting worse every year that we, let it go.
Yeah, especially at this point.
And what, to your point, Nate, being used less and less every year, and now having trouble staffing the pool.
I think Mike was able to obtain some funding to do some Sika patching on the ground. So, I mean, they'll probably live by for another year or two, but after that, I mean, it's...
Well, when was the last time that there was major work done at Prospect?
05-ish.
Yeah.
I think 05-ish, and around there. So, I mean, there's some, you could think about a spray park, something along those lines with a grant, but you should probably talk to Mike about that, because I know he has some ongoing O&M costs with that type of operation too. But I mean, it does get used pretty heavily. So That's what I know about it.
We did send you the attendance data for both
Thank
the
you
spray
for that.
park
Yes,
and the pool.
that did help.
So what do we have, has the rec commission taken any kind of direction or, you know,
I remember Councilman Geis explaining this about 10 years ago. It's like we're the parents and the rec commission is the teenager. Hey, Dad, we're going to need some money for this.
And they have, at our last meeting, we spoke extensively about the poll and it's a little bit heartbreaking on an emotional level because the pool has been here forever. But on a practical level, I think we understand that each year when I say we, I mean the rec commission and the board. I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think we should all get together, at a meeting.
This would be its own work session.
That would be its own work session, and I think it's practical. I think the practical approach is, I think people see the writing on the board that we're losing money on it every single year. We're having trouble staffing it, and some of this, which Mike Cover can speak more directly about, is, some of these items of maintenance. I think, if I understand it correctly, you have to actually fill the pool. You have to actually fill the pool first, and then kind of turn some things on and see if it holds, basically.
See
So
where the
we're
leaks
talking
are.
about and the gutter systems. I guess we're talking about, was it 360,000 gallons of water? Does that sound about right?
well, that was a question I had, is what's the leak like and where is all that water going then?
I know they could speak more intelligently about just about the the nuances of that, but I mean, I'm under this impression that we would actually have to take that water out to fix what we found,
Probably.
and then get another,
I mean, the thing is that
it's just cost after cost.
yeah,
after
but
cost.
you're the group that is dealing with the rec in the, not just in the city, but in the immediate, region. And I think it'd be kind of, if you guys had a kind of a game plan or what you thought, or even if it was, in a perfect world, this is what if we had a pool, this is what it would look like, kind of thing.
Weren't we anticipating to have conversations with the rec commission directly?
I think the meeting is in May, but the go, no-go decision that we talked about with Mike Hofer would be April 15th, because if he doesn't have enough lifeguards signed up by April 15th, I think he feels like we need to scrub the mission and plan on the pool not being open this summer, because if there's no indication you can staff it, and then there's about, $10,000 in paint, repainting the pool, and
there were some things that, correct me if I'm wrong, there were some things that were done to the pool last year because of it being closed with COVID-19.
Throughout last year, he did mention that they had some maintenance as to what they could do. It was pretty minor, I think,
Yeah.
compared to
Well, not $1.5 million. Yeah.
It definitely wasn't.
Yeah.
And as far as what you were saying, what the city manager was saying about the staffing issues, it's we don't have. We had some trouble. Even if we had a line out the door of people who wanted to work as a lifeguard at Prospect Pool and make whatever it is, X amount of dollars for the summer, we don't have the certification.
Well, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
isn't part of the problem that they haven't done any certification in a while, and that's all done through the Red Cross, as I recall?
It used to be the school district.
Okay.
There's a,
Gym classes that offer.
I think there's a couple that do it, Hollidaysburg, Y, and then I think Penn State Altoona, but I don't know if either of those are doing them right now. I know my son's on the swim team, and his coach put out a message that she was contacted by CBRC looking for lifeguards. So among the swim team, it's aware that Mike got the message out there to folks in the community that we need lifeguards. So hopefully we get some.
There is a scouting certification for lifeguards, which isn't always accepted everywhere, but I mean is a certification to lifeguard nonetheless. And I don't know if that's been pursued as an option or not. But if, to your point, I mean, if there's not enough applicants, then that kind of takes the decision off the table anyway.
Well, at least for this year, but I mean the
Right.
larger decision is, and what Mike has said is that this is something that's been progressively harder each year to find the staff, to stand up the pool. It's not become easier. So the big challenge is even if you can find the people to run it this year, for it to be a long-term commitment, it requires some kind of sea change. I think to Councilman Kelly's point, if the community were building a pool today, is that where you'd choose to build it? I mean, there's no off-street parking there. It's certainly advantageous to the people who live close by, but a facility like that is, in today's world, is more likely to be part of a much larger recreational complex that has playing fields, playgrounds, ample off-street parking. I mean, of course, that's a challenge for people who have to potentially maybe ride a city bus to get to the pool, but not impossible to overcome.
I think we all understand that there's definitely this attempted balancing act of being community oriented with reality of costs. I mean, but $1.5 million for these upgrades is. I'm assuming would this qualify for prevailing wage with us owning the asset?
Yeah, anything over 25,000.
Yeah. So you're talking it's probably 40% more expensive just from that standpoint alone.
30-ish, yeah. But a lot.
I mean, there's some grant money available. Definitely not.
And $40,000 for a study for DCNR though.
That's what I've been told. I mean, if we would do it, it would probably be 10, but because of all the boxes you have to check to make sure, the biggest thing would be the accessibility. I mean, you may end up, and I mean, that's $1.5 million. That's a major renovation. I mean, if you look at it, you probably have to have a ramp in from the shallow end. It's 3.5 feet down right now, so steps, right size in the pool. The concrete's punky. It's in really bad disrepair.
Well, and it's
definitely
accessibility from an ADA standpoint, but accessibility from a community standpoint is another issue too.
Well, if we're looking at $1.5 million for extensive renovation, what would be the cost of another site? Just
We definitely
start
look
from
at it.
scratch.
Yeah, we could run some numbers, but when we talk about an investment this large, I know the council has talked about the division of costs between the city, Logan Township, and other entities that support the CVRC. So it would seem an opportune time to talk about who's paying what if we're looking at making a major investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, I would like to see the cost of a
brand new pool.
new site, like just to compare apples to apples.
Okay.
Somewhere like Garfield might not have the parking, but a Leopold or something like that.
I don't know you have enough room there.
What about in the township?
Yeah, Leopold is.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nate. Moving on to recovery homes / sober living homes.
Just in follow-up to, we had discussed this last month. I know I, did some research. I came up with a extremely rough draft of an ordinance, which I had forwarded to Ken and Rebecca for their review before we brought it to you. I know in the context of this review, there was some inquiry from the Planning Commission, a member of the Planning Commission, about bringing in outside counsel to craft this ordinance. I mean, as I sit here, I feel capable of handling that, but I did want to bring that to your attention, that was brought up because the ADA issues and that come up with these type of things. But I mean, at this juncture, unless the council feels strongly about that, I mean, I feel comfortable handling that. But the draft of the ordinance I came up with, I mean, right now we're waiting on the state to come up with specific regulations on this. I looked at the statute, and they came out with a statute which says we're going to come up with regulations for this, and they still haven't done it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of amusing. I'm like, they spent the time to pass a statute that says we're going to come up with regulations instead of coming up with the regulations. I think it's a situation where
the city can be proactive with crafting some type of regulations to, provide these are like legitimate, well-run organizations that would be an enhancement to the city and not some, fly by the seat of your pants, fly by night situation. So, I guess I'm just looking for some guidance from the council. One, having my office craft this, which I feel comfortable doing, and two, what your thoughts are as far as, looking to create an ordinance to address this.
So how long do you would anticipate for you to draft that?
Well, the rough draft already sent out to Ken and Rebecca. I mean, I would say by our next work session, I could have something for you folks to look at, kind of give me your thoughts, that sort of thing. I would envision having a catch-all in there that, if and when the Commonwealth comes up with regulations, they'd have to be in full compliance with those regulations as well. So,
the biggest thing here, I think, is off-street parking, because if the city requires a reasonable amount of off-street parking, the number of places this could exist shrinks dramatically, because there's so few residential properties in the city that have any kind of accommodation for more than, let's say, 1 or 2 parking spaces. So, I mean, I don't want to dive too deeply into what the overall intent might be, but if the concern is we don't want to have an undue impact on surrounding neighborhoods, I think the natural thing to say, what the most disruptive thing would be having like 8 cars in a residential property with only parking for 2, because those other 6 cars are going to be on the street someplace. So if we have some kind of language that says there needs to be, 1 off-street parking space per resident, I think that greatly shrinks the number of parcels that would be, available for this particular use.
When will you be looking to open something like this? And when a couple of years?
Well, we've gotten people that
that
want to do this now.
I think it's a matter of when are we going to get the ordinance put in place.
Yeah.
So that's, I think, again, it's a matter of when do we have a draft council can look at, and then subject to, us feeling confident with that, then introducing it. And
So we already have a place in mind.
no, this is not. No,
This is not something we want to
No.
do. These are recovery homes that people want to put in the city.
There are
and
there are
nothing to
no
regulate them.
current plans, correct?
We received an application from a couple that wishes to buy a property, which oddly enough was a personal care home previously, that would have plenty of room on it for off-street parking. So if they were to complete that purchase, I think that probably under any reasonable ordinance we would draft, they would likely be able to do that.
The problem is that we have no guidelines now.
We have nothing.
We have none. So anybody
Not
could
one.
do it, and because of the fact that this falls within accepted rules of the ADA, you can't do anything relative to zoning on this. So what we're trying to do is be proactive so that we can prevent a situation where too many people living in a house, not enough parking, no compliance with ADA within the property, and things like that. So we're trying to be proactive and have some guidelines so that when something like this comes up, here's the guidelines, this is what you need to do. And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell. I think it's really a matter of getting the draft and having it to council and us taking a look at it and then introducing it and going forward with that.
Well, I think what we'll do is
So-
we'll plan on having it to you the next work session.
End of April then, second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Parking is certainly an issue, but we want to be really careful with buffer with the neighbors. We got to be as neighborhood friendly as possible with this.
Like a setback requirement or a...
Well, I'll tell you, the other issue here is we're talking recovery home, sober living home, and the goal here is for people to recover. And I've had the opinion that a city is a very difficult place because there's too much access to drugs. And where there's access to drugs, when you're near people and in neighborhoods like that, it creates an adverse situation for the people you're trying to help. And so it works both ways. You want to be protective to the neighbors, but you also want to give people a chance that are in need of help to actually get the help they need without the temptation being within walking distance of them, too. And that's something we may not be able to do anything about. So we're going to have to be very wise with the way we go about this. But right now, what we come up with is going to be better than what we have.
Yeah.
Anybody have anything else on that item? No? Okay. All right, moving on to council discussion items. Councilman Carper.
I have nothing else at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Kelly?
I'm just going to recap then. So on A, Heritage Plaza and 14th Street, we're going to have something to vote on at the first meeting in April. We'll have the amendment for the lease agreement for the Tower Alliance at that meeting as well. We have to get back to the city manager by next Wednesday on the cdbg funding. Ken's going to continue to put some work together on the sidewalk projects. The prospect pool is going to end up being a joint session then with us and the rec commission, and solicitor will have for us for the April work session then draft ordinance on the guidelines for recovery homes, sober living homes. Right? That's all I have. That's a full session tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Butterball.
Yeah, one of the things I would like to encourage folks to do, we've been updating, and the staff has been doing a really good job of updating the website with like planned activities or things the planning commission is going over, or the different plans and upcoming events. And so I'd like to encourage folks to keep in mind altoonapa.gov website, because you can really get a lot of information off of that and see what's going on in your particular neighborhood.
So,
Yes, thanks. Sorry about that.
Councilman Kashana.
I would just like to, also encourage people now that the weather is getting nicer and that we are coming down to some restrictions being lifted, to, don't be afraid to get out there and start to show, commerce and some community spirit again. As vaccinations are on the rise, and as the, what the reported levels of COVID are on the decline, hopefully. So everybody stay safe, continue doing what they're saying to do, but I think it's a nice time of year to start getting out and walking around and start getting back in touch with your community. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilman Nikas?
Nothing at this time, Mayor.
I have nothing either. Media questions. Bill?
Regarding the recovery house, would that be a standalone ordinance, or is that I guess Tom, is that a standalone ordinance or a zoning amendment?
I think what we're looking at right now, it would be within the chapter of the code dealing in zoning, but it's going to pertain to providing a definition for these type of facilities, as well as including some regulations regarding same.
Does it, being in the zoning part of the zoning ordinance, I guess, pretty much limit what you can do, I guess, because of the state, what is it, the state planning code, municipal planning code?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you have right now is the way that, the zoning code deals with what types of businesses and what types of facilities can be in what parts of the city, that sort of thing. And if you look at the zoning code, it includes things in there such as halfway houses, and all these types of facilities are different. They don't fall under that definition per se. It just would seem to make sense to put it in there.
Okay. Okay. That's all I have. Thanks.
Amanda? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Congratulations to Amanda.